that's invaluable, absolutely invaluable, to have someone on campus who can say, hey, there's this whole crew of people that we have not reached out to. Why aren't we reaching out to them? And maybe this thing that we're doing that we think is innocent is actually impeding our ability to reach other ethnic communities, and they are very much in need of reaching out to as well, attract more people from other cultures.
Don't even get me started about that. I've yet to find the Catholic basketball group. I found one in New Orleans, but anyways, that's a whole nother podcast.
Yeah, it sure is.
Well, I agree that it's essential. I was not a Catholic in college, but maybe I would have been if there had been
a basketball team.
Yeah. Hello and welcome to the Black Catholic Messenger Show, where we keep it Black and we keep it Catholic. We've been away for a little while, but we're back now and better than ever. Today we have with us a special guest, Dr. Mario Dance, a retired veterinarian based in Virginia who felt a call to help Catholic missionary organizations attract and retain missionaries from the African American and other minority communities. With a group of collaborators, he started the Catholic Evangelical Missionary People of Color Grant, which he will discuss with us today. Dr. Dance, thank you for coming on the show today.
Thanks for inviting me, Nate. I appreciate it.
Of course. It's wonderful to have your voice here. So can you tell me a bit about yourself and your career background? I happen to know 2 Black Catholic veterinarians, but I imagine that is not very common.
No, it's not. I am two things about me that I think are probably critical to this discussion is that I was a military brat and I was not raised Catholic. I was born in Japan. My mom, who's from Panama, was culturally Catholic. My dad was culturally Protestant. When they got married, they couldn't figure out the faith, so they just threw them both out and decided not to raise us as anything. My mom did she did have us baptized when I was like 5 years old, so it's one attempt to come back to the church, but that ended when she came across a priest who made a pretty racial comment towards her here in the United States. So she left, and I didn't pop into the Catholic Church again until high school. So the whole idea of being a cradle Catholic is very foreign to me. But in high school, she came in out of guilt, which is very common among Hispanic individuals. And she came for the sacraments. I hadn't been First Communion or Confirmation. Part of that process involved me going on a retreat, and at that retreat, I had a hugely powerful encounter with the Lord, and it changed my life and the trajectory of my life forever, and has continued to do that even today. That continued through college. When a lot of people dropped their faith, I continued in college, but when I was there, I got involved with a community there that was a kind of a charismatic prayer group that I got connected to. And one of the members of that community served with a ministry called NET Ministries, the National Evangelization Teams. And he came back, told me about it. And I was like, dude, I want to do that. I'd been doing youth ministry. I was converted through youth ministry, had been involved in youth ministry in our diocese for years. And it seemed like a nice next step. So I did a year with NET Ministries after I graduated from veterinary school, and did that. Had a powerful time there, came off the road, and then started doing youth ministry while I was doing my work as a veterinarian. During that time, I helped to start another nonprofit called Missionaries of Christ that took young people and college folks on international short-term missions. We have a base of operations in Honduras, helped to start that. But when I was looking at retirement, since I never married, I'm a single guy, and I was looking at an early retirement, I thought, well, I want to go and serve the Lord in full-time mission. I had actually thought about doing that when I graduated from vet school initially, and got distracted by a lot of things, dating and this career and this ministry, and
We
But I was
all.
like, yeah, yes. So I said, okay, I set a date to take an early retirement. I started visiting different mission places where I thought I was going to go to some crazy country and end my life there, either as a martyr or as an old dude in some random village in the world. Every
Hmm.
time I kept doing that, I kept running into an obstacle. And the last place I was thinking about going to was China, believe it or not. And there was an obstacle there related to age and how much one can do in China before they send you back to your own country because
Yeah.
of age. So I came back from that disappointed, and I was talking to a friend of mine who is the vice president of partnerships at SPO, and he happens to also be one of the youth that I discipled when he was in high school. He said, well, why don't you consider coming to join our ministry team? We're a mission organization. And I told him, I was like, yeah, you guys aren't a real missionary organization. I was like, and he was like, yes, we are. The college campus is a mission field, and you should come check us out. And on top of that, we want you to do two things. We want you to help us to develop an international mission program, which you have lots of experience with, and also to help us engage other ethnic communities. So I checked them out. They were great. Um, I was quite impressed by the folks there, without a doubt, because they started in Minnesota. They're a very white organization and they needed lots of help
Hmm.
in that area. But they were very kind people who are, very passionate about the Lord. And so I took an early retirement, started working for them, and it's been a great experience and very providential. It was very clear that the Lord had led me to this ministry from all the things that have been happening in it, not only in my family, but also in the ministry itself. So, and when I started working, because they wanted me to help them engage ethnic communities,
Hmm.
I started talking to the few minorities who were in the ministry, trying to figure out what are the big obstacles. And so the biggest obstacle, which is the biggest obstacle for all Catholics who are serving in evangelization ministry, is fundraising. If you're going to build hospitals or you're going to go to schools on mission field, you can usually get an NGO or some government funding for something like that. But if you're doing Catholic evangelization, like we do with St. Paul's Outreach, most of the full-time missionaries have to call their friends and family and ask them for money. And that's hard for everyone, but it's even harder for people of color sometimes because
Yeah.
the pools that they're dipping into aren't as affluent as their counterparts on the mission field.
Yeah. The pool can
So,
be quite shallow, I think,
yeah.
and it's not just with Catholics. I remember when I was Protestant, the Protestant missions organizations, they have that same issue.
Yeah, so the idea for the grant actually came from a Protestant organization called InterVarsity Christian Fellowship.
Hmm.
They have a pretty diverse ministry team, and I had been to one of their conferences, and I said, well, how'd you get there? And they said, this is one of the things we do. We offer our missionaries who are struggling to raise their funds, not just minorities, but they have the same issue. We offer our minority missionaries or those missionaries who are coming from churches that are really tiny. We offer them this grant to get them started on the road, and it has produced tremendous fruit. So I stole the idea, baptized it Catholic, and tried to first start it in SPO, but and I understand why this is the case now. To do it within the ministry was a lot more challenging because they would have to reword some of their documents to include something like that. And that would be,
Mm.
it would take some time to do, but it would take a lot of time and energy. So I realized talking to other ministries like Focus Ministry, Vagabond Ministries, the ones that are doing this kind of work, and other actually non-evangelistic Catholic missionary movements in the church, all of them were having the same problem, retaining and recruiting minorities in their mission field. So I started it apart from SPO, and it has I knocked on the doors of my friends and family to get money for it and launched it, and it's been going ever since and is growing. Interestingly enough, every year we have more applicants and more people who express a need for this. kind of support. And
Hmm.
yeah, I think it's a great thing, and I think it's doing really good work. The people that I meet who are applying for the grant are incredible individuals who want to serve the church, who love the church, who want to spread the good news about the church. And representation matters. When you see that
Absolutely.
person, when you see that person's face on campus or in the mission area that you're working in, it has the power to, one, draw others from that ethnic background in, either because you speak the language or you look like them.
Yeah.
And it also has the ability to build bridges of communication within the ministry about what it is that ethnic minorities experience and how can we as a church serve them better. So it's been good.
Yes, it sounds incredible. I remember when I first saw the the flyer on a table at a conference, and I was like, "What is this? This sounds different and refreshing for the U.S. Catholic Church." I'm curious about the name, though. The Catholic Evangelical Missionary People of Color Grant. I know people of color is kind of the in vogue term now for minorities. So I'm
Yep.
wondering how you guys settled on that and who falls into that category in your organization's reckoning.
So the Catholic evangelical missionary part, we wanted to be clear that we're using it for Catholic evangelization. Like I said, it's
Hmm.
easy to find money to build a hospital. It's easy to find money to go educate someone on the mission field, whether it be inner city or somewhere else. There's lots of government money and philanthropies who are willing to support that. But evangelizing in the Catholic Church is a lot more challenging. So that's why we chose that part of the name. People of color, as we define it in our organization, is anybody from an African American, Hispanic, Native American population, or Pacific Island Asian community. Essentially
Okay,
non-white.
yeah. Well, it could be white Hispanic people, though, right?
Yes, that's exactly right.
Okay,
But believe it or
fascinating.
not, they still present some interesting challenges as well.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I'm not knocking it. I was just
Mm-hmm.
curious how you guys define it because I remember seeing a Twitter poll about a year ago about how people define people of color, and the variance in responses
Mm-hmm.
was fascinating. So I was just curious how you guys define that. And I remember seeing on your flyer or at your table that I saw like some of your different people you're supporting, and I saw that it was quite diverse. But I did have that question. But thank you,
Mm-hmm.
thank you for that. So, what would you say some of the challenges have been in getting this off the ground? I can imagine a few, probably some similar to that we faced with Black Catholic Messenger. I think when people see certain things, American Catholics see certain things related to race or ethnicity in any way, often that kind of people shut down. So, what have you guys experienced?
Well, it's actually very interesting because they're almost exactly the same challenges that the missionaries are facing as they're going out and asking for money. One, if you're going into minority communities, so I speak Spanish, so I can go into the Hispanic community as well. But if you're going into minority communities, the amount of money to pull from them is smaller. So that's one. If you're going into majority communities, there's this obstacle. You're doing something that is maybe perceived as racist because
Mm,
you're selecting minorities to help. And people have all kinds of mental associations with government programs and like, how does this work, And so, and some people, I mean, quite frankly, aren't in favor of increasing minority presence in the church, um, including Hispanics. Like there's people like, I don't want more Hispanics in my church. They're taking over the church, like it's a growing
mm,
population in the church. And there's that voice there. So the same challenges that the missionaries are facing when they're going out raising money are the same ones that I'm facing. I have more skills and more weight to overcome them than most, but they're still the same ones. And it can be quite a daunting campaign to And the other thing too, in the minority community, evangelization is not the highest priority. So for example, if I talk about Catholic evangelization in the African American community, I go to a predominantly African American Catholic church and ethnic church. I have to contend with people who think that the church hasn't been the best support of the African American community, and they see sort of a more traditional or more orthodox vision of Catholicism, where you want to bring people into the church. They see that as not supporting their particular political or theological bent. And so they're not wanting to support that financially. You're going out there and converting people. I don't think that's a great idea. Why don't we all just kind of hold hands and sing Kumbaya? Which I'm all about that, but I do think there's something unique about the Catholic Church that's beautiful and wonderful and powerful and worth inviting people into. We
got probably about half of the Black Catholics now in the United States is people going out and converting.
Right. So, and we're losing Hispanics, we're losing African Americans. It's a hemorrhage by droves because we are not recognizing and supporting their presence in the church. I think at the best we're tolerating them. So it can be a real challenge for sure.
Yeah. And how have you been able to overcome that? It sounds like criticism from both sides, the people you're trying to help and the people who can help you help them. So how do you get past those barriers?
Well, it may seem a little bit simplistic, but I try to focus everybody on Jesus.
Right. Amazing.
It's like, okay, this is a Jesus thing. This isn't a political thing. Is this the church that Jesus started? Yes. Does Jesus call us to go out and make disciples of all nations? Yes. Is Jesus the man who brings healing and flourishing and restoration to broken places? Yes. Is he one to help those in need? Yes. So let's start there. You can figure out what may have caused the need. You can debate what may have caused the need or what's the best way to do that. But this is a way within the church to have a population that is endangered. And if you consider them to be valuable, then we should be looking at ways to invite them to be part of the church in a deeper and a more effective way. And one of the things that I said to my own missionary organization, St. Paul's Outreach, is because we're sort of a more charismatic organization, there's a big thread of that in our ministry. The Holy Spirit is a huge theological thrust in our community. I say, so when you look at the Holy Spirit, and when the Holy Spirit came on Pentecost, what was the first thing that the Holy Spirit did? The first thing the Holy Spirit did was empower the followers of Jesus to speak in languages so that they can reach all the cultures that were represented there. So if we are really moving in the power of the Holy Spirit, we should see that same result in our ministry. And if you consider that at the end of time, when we go to the end of the book and read Revelation, what do we see? Every tribe, every nation worshiping the Lamb around the throne. If that is the beginning and the end of the story, what is happening in the middle here? We're not doing what we're supposed to be doing if all we see is one ethnic culture or expression in our ministry. We are really not that, there's a balance of population here, but we can do better than what we're doing right now. If we're an all-white organization, then maybe we are not moving with the Spirit as authentically as we might think we are. And somebody pointed this out to me too in the Protestant world, and it's true. When the modern Pentecostal movement happened in the United States way back in the day, in the Azusa Street revival, One of the things that characterized it was that at a time when there's a lot of racial tension in this country, the Pentecostals were building communities, interracial communities, where everybody was
Absolutely.
worshiping together,
Yeah.
which, you can argue about the theological underpinnings of that movement, but the truth is the Holy Spirit was doing something and bringing people from different ethnicities together in one church to worship. And that's what happened on Pentecost, bringing people, uniting the world around Jesus in the church through the power of the Holy Spirit. So if we're really trying to move with the Spirit, we should be seeing that kind of fruit in our ministry as well. And I think we are. It's just slower than I'd like it to be, but hopefully this CEMPOC grant is part of the solution to that problem.
Yeah, I hope so too. It sounds like a lot of the background work that you have to do to support the actual work of CEMPOC it kind of intersects with Pope Francis's vision of synodality, that needing to sit down and learn, encourage people to learn how to listen, radical listening, and from there moving based on what the Spirit says in that collaborative conversation. What do you think of that idea? Do you think about synodality when you're doing this work?
So one of what I think is probably the key solution to healing the racism and the racial tensions and the discord that we see in our country is a radical surrender to Christ and his ability to build relationships among people. And that can only happen when we choose to love one another and have those kinds of conversations. I think Francis is right on. We do need to have more conversations. Like, my own personal experience has been the most effective ways that I have had about promoting this grant or helping people understand my experience as an African American Catholic man have been in the context of conversations that have been had between people, my friends. People care about one another. It's easy to yell at somebody on the TV. It's easy to criticize somebody in an article. But when there's somebody that's your friend who cares about you and doesn't have an agenda to hurt you or whatever you may invent in your mind, when you're talking to a friend who cares about you and is really just trying to share his or her heart with you, that makes it much easier to see truth. Our anger and our frustration and our discord really is, I think, coming from hell to keep us separated and divisive and fighting one another when there's a larger battle that needs to happen. And the only way we're going to get there is through listening to one another, living with one another in community, and working together to resolve the problems that we have in our world. Because there's lots of them. This is just one of many.
Indeed. And speaking of division, let's talk about the U.S. bishops.
Okay.
Do you have the support of the USCCB or of your local ordinary, anybody of that sort?
So I am listed in the National NCD, National Catholic Directory. So, so my diocese does support it. I don't know if the bishop knows much about us, but somewhere along the line he signed off and seems to be okay with what we're doing. As far as the larger USCCB, I don't know where they stand. I have some relationships with some individuals in the USCCB conference and having conversations with people now, actually, about what the bishops are doing in that regard. But I don't know what they think about us. And the few things that I've read, I mean, on paper, they're good things that are coming out, but I think in practice, there may be some things that are not so helpful.
See, it's interesting to know. Yeah, I've been at the last few bishops' meetings, fall meeting, the big ones, and I don't recall hearing much about missionaries, domestic missionaries. So it's very yeah, that might be an interesting topic to try to get on their radar, and specifically your organization and how it's trying to help the people who
I'm
need the most
trying.
help.
I'm trying. I've met some people. Actually, it's amazing how God orchestrates relationships and connections with people. And so I've made some connections with people who are in that office, and they are very supportive of it. But it's a big organization, and there's a lot of moving parts in it. So getting on their radar. And we're very young. We've only been around for about 3 years, so getting on their radar might be a little bit more challenging.
Indeed, yeah. You guys have been around about as long as BCM, so we're powering through together. Keep it up. Uh, so what would you say is next in the next year or two for CEMPOC? What's the plan? How to grow? What's the next steps?
So the interesting thing about the grant is that the word is getting out to the different missionary organizations that we have, that it's available.
Yeah.
And so now people are starting to knock on our door saying, we totally get what you're talking about. We totally understand. I mean, like, whenever I had a conversation with Focus Missionary Missions, which is a much larger Catholic mission organization, they're like, oh my gosh, this is exactly what we need, because yes, they are these really wonderful individuals who want to serve the church, and they're hitting all of these obstacles as they're raising their funds. They see the need very in a very visceral way among their missionaries. Not all of them, but there's a good population of them that they are struggling to raise their funds. They're like, we really need something like this. So they're having conversation. I mean, the presence of our ministry has provoked conversation within their own ministry to see, well, maybe we can do this internally, but until we can figure that out, can we tap into yours? So we've been getting lots of people knocking on our doors for help. So that population is growing. So we are looking for ways to grow correspondingly with the funds. We can't give out what we don't have. And I mean, eventually we're going to have to start to turn people away and say, no, we can't give you a grant. We don't want to do that, obviously, but it's very clear that probably next year we're going to have to put some limits on how many grants we give out. So we're looking for ways to get grants or get to some church populations so that we can pitch the idea, get regular people to commit to being on the support team, giving regularly to the grant, because the more we have flowing in, the more we can give out, essentially. And we're using the same model that most missionary organizations use. I mean, there's one-time donors, and those are great. But the people who are willing to give anything from $10 to $1 million every month, those are the things that help us to do the work that we need to do.
I imagine $1 million a month could be very useful.
Yeah, it could be very useful.
So so if I understand what you said correctly, you haven't had to turn anyone away in your history so far.
We had a few that we had. Well, most of the time it's as a result of people not getting their application in on time or completing their application on time. And we're
Not
using
because
that.
you didn't have enough money.
Right. So the board has taken the position, well, we've got it, we got to give it out. If we have it, we'll give it out. So we have 2 times during the year when we give out. At the beginning of the missionary year, which is typically in August. And then today we have a board meeting, so we're going to give out some more in January for those who have not been able to raise their money thus far. So we have a few candidates who are applying now. And if we have it and their application is complete and they are willing to there's some stipulations that we have for anybody who receives a grant. If they're willing to abide by the stipulations, then if we have it, we'll give it to them. We want to encourage everyone to serve the church and to make it easy for them to serve and stay in the church.
Absolutely. And so then for the past 3 years, funding has come from generous donors?
Yeah. This last year, we went to what they call an evangelization Shark Tank. I was invited to participate in Michigan, and it was a sort of a Shark Tank competition for funds from wealthy donors who came to this event. And so we had to, pitch the idea in 5 minutes, and they would pepper us with questions about the ministry, what why it was what it was, and what its needs were, and were the needs real, how were they measuring, and so we went to that and we got a good chunk of money from that, and part of the stipulations of that grant was that we had to use part of it for development work, which we've been doing by going to different conferences. We'll be at the Eucharistic conference, setting up, trying to speak to people about potentially supporting the grant.
Incredible. Hopefully I'll see you there.
Yeah.
It's in my home state, Indiana. So
Is it really?
yeah, I don't live there anymore, but I grew up there. So I'm excited to be there. And I'm glad you guys will be there.
We will. If you know anybody, connect us.
I'll be working on that now that it's been mentioned. So what else does our podcast audience need to know about CEMPOC?
Yeah, I think it's a need. I mean, it's a desperate need right now. I think the majority of the evangelization organizations are targeting a younger demographic. You have things like NET, which are high schoolers. Vagabond Ministry is inner city youth as well. Focus, SPO, college students. This is the young church. This is an opportunity for us to really make an impact on that generation and invite them to this beautiful thing we call the church. Especially on the college campuses, this is an opportunity for us to get significant, articulate players in that ministry field to speak about their own experiences about being a minority in the United States and being a minority in the church. That's invaluable. Absolutely invaluable to have someone on campus who can say, hey, there's this whole crew of people that we have not reached out to. Why aren't we reaching out to them? And maybe this thing that we're doing that we think is innocent is actually impeding our ability to reach other ethnic communities, and they are very much in need of reaching out to as well. People see a Black person and don't think automatically, well, I could invite them to church, not realizing this person's from Africa, and most of Africa, most of the countries in Africa have a very strong Catholic presence there, and this person is probably just as much of a Catholic who's floating in limbo as any of the other people that you might reach out to, or the Hispanic community.
Yeah.
And maybe Frisbee isn't the sport that you play during the free time. Maybe basketball or soccer would attract more people from other cultures.
Don't even get me started about that. I've yet to find the Catholic basketball group. I found one in New Orleans, but anyways, that's a whole nother podcast.
Yeah, it sure is.
Well, I agree that it's essential. I was not a Catholic in college, but maybe I would have been if there had been
a basketball team.
Yeah, I'm playing some basketball, and then they're like, "Oh,
Brother.
Actually, hello, we're actually Catholic missionaries. We want you to join the church." Well,
Exactly.
I sit down and listen.
So this is one of my biggest points. Like, the big sport that the guys in SPO play is ultimate Frisbee, and I go, that ain't nothing but a white boy sport. It's like, and you're surprised that there aren't other ethnicities who are joining your ranks. Why don't you get on that basketball court, go on that soccer court, and play with those folks, and see how many more people from other ethnicities you're going to attract. Frisbee is not the international sport. It's
right.
Like, I'm sorry.
The international sport. Maybe it's the international white sport. Who knows?
Yeah.
Don't let me hate on Frisbee. I like Frisbee, but you're absolutely right.
I'm not telling them not to play Frisbee. I'm not telling them not to play Frisbee. I'm saying, okay, expand your sport, participation into these other places, and maybe you'll start to see more people interested in what you're selling.
Yeah. Yeah. The diverse perspective is necessary, because people will innocently not think about these things and
exactly
make as negative as an impact to somebody who maybe was doing it.
Yeah, I mean, I hear they're not coming. Well, maybe it's because you're not going to the right places. You're not making yourself present, and to have somebody in the ministry vocalizing
Yeah, who can tell them
That,
that?
and it's not in a mean way. You're not doing anything mean. I'm not saying you're being racist, you
Mm,
know. I'm just saying that you don't see what you're doing because you live in this world. I
just
don't.
white. Sometimes being white is enough. You don't even have to be racist.
Right. Yeah, sometimes that's enough.
Well, I'm thankful for the work that you're doing, and I hope it expands. I hope you get $1 million a month from at least one person.
That would be
Um,
great.
so, in view of that, where can people find out more about the Catholic Evangelical Missionary People of Color Fund or grant?
They can go to www.cempoc.org. CEMPOC's Catholic Evangelical Missionary People of Color, CEMPOC.org. And you can find all the information. You can see the missionaries we're supporting, some of the amazing people that we are keeping in the mission field. And if you want to give us something, we'd be happy to take your green.
Absolutely. Dr. Dance, thank you so much for coming on the Black Catholic Messenger Show today. And we will keep your work in constant prayer.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks for inviting me to. God bless your ministry as well, Nate.
Thank you. And before we go, I'll remind the people and the internets, don't forget to subscribe and share the Black Catholic Messenger Show. All right, that's been it. Thank you, Dr. Dance. Until next time.
God bless, man.